Hello and welcome everyone to Ananke's Girls Summit. It is an absolute pleasure that we begin our live sessions with the amazing Sabine Holl of IBM. In today's presentation, titled A Woman's Journey to Technical Executive, Sabine Holl will present key research, about women in tech. But first, a little bit about Sabine Holl. Sabine Holl is IBM's Vice President Technology, Technical Sales, and Chief Technology Officer for IBM Middle East and Africa. She is responsible for IBM's technical community across the Middle East and Africa. For her, innovation is literally driven by inclusion across all levels of technology, skills, and experiences, from graduates just starting out through to thought leaders, specialists, architects, and advocates who help and advise IBM's clients to accelerate and transform their business across all industries and into the fourth cognitive industrial revolution. With new markets opening in Eastern Europe, Russia, and the Middle East and Africa, she led by example, introducing first of its kind, brand new technology whilst transforming and persuading minds towards the digital world. It led her to be the first woman in IBM's software division in CEMEA region to be certified as an IT specialist. In 2006, Sabine took on an assignment in corporate HR in the US, focusing on how to help technical leaders grow their technical careers all the way to distinguished engineers and IBM fellows. In her current role as CTO, she leverages her experience in the US to help build the future generation of technical leaders in MEA. In addition, she also established several graduate programs focusing on diversity and inclusion. These programs support national agendas such as Emiratization, Saudization, or BBBEE in South Africa, as well as providing young women an opportunity to start their technical career. In 2019, she started to build a Women in Tech network for technical women across IBM in the Middle East and Africa, and has been appointed as executive sponsor for women at IBM MEA in July 2021. In 2016, IBM established IBM Health Corps. Sabine had the privilege to join the first team of senior experts who worked with the American Cancer Society to design and build ChemoQuant, a free IBM cloud-hosted tool that helps health ministries better forecast their chemotherapy needs. The tool draws upon IBM's analytics, data science, and cancer epidemiology expertise. ChemoQuant is helping Ethiopia, Uganda, and Nigeria forge agreements for access to therapies at significantly lower costs. If and when she needs a break from her busy schedule, she disappears into the blue. Not the big blue IBM, but exploring marine life in Oman, if time allows, further away in one of the many wonderful seas of the world. So welcome, Sabine.
Oh, thank you, Sabine. And thank you so much for inviting me, and also for the next session, my esteemed colleagues. So I'm really excited. I think, you summed it up pretty well. I'm very passionate about talent, young talent, helping young women to grow their career. And so today I will share with you what we do in IBM to help women accelerate their career journeys. And I thought I'll start off with some fun facts, or maybe not so fun facts. Given that 50% of world's population are women, there are only 37 of the Fortune 500 company CEOs are women. So that's the number for 2020. So there is clearly work to do to improve the number or increase the number of women at the board level. Another fact is, so we have 40% of the global workforce is women, 17% are in ICT, but only 3% women say that career in tech is their first choice. And a study showed that it's really down to the shortage of female role models. And this is really confirmed when I started to speak to a lot of women in IBM before I started to actually formalize the Women in Tech network, that a big ask was, we want role models. We want to see who else is driving or who else is choosing a career in technology and how they accelerate, how they overcome challenges, and that I can just like brainstorm and reassure myself that I'm not doing the odd thing, you know. So this was really an important ask, which I discovered, and that's why I launched some, if you look at my LinkedIn, you know, the MIA Super Women series, which showcases women across all levels of their career to talk about what they do in IBM as in technology. And then there was another study I came across by the UN on ICT gender equality and the paradox around that. So I'm born in Austria, which is a very small country in the heart of Europe, which basically I could do whatever I wanted. You know, there was never, you know, technologies for men, you know, going to work in a more female dominated field is the preference. My parents were very supportive, but I was always one of very few women in whatever I did. So my passion was about mathematics, natural science. I obviously went into a technical college, and we were 4 women out of 20 when we graduated. The classes below us had no women at all. So, and then I moved to the Middle East, or I started to work in Central Eastern Europe, Middle East and Africa. And I found so many more women actually in technology when I started to work in the Gulf region, when I started to engage with Egypt. And I thought, oh, that's nice, you know, there are so many other women, but I couldn't really explain. It was more like my personal observation working with clients, seeing more women in tech. And then I found this study which really talked about the gender equality paradox and highlighting, for example, countries like Belgium, who have the smallest gender gap in general, but have a huge gender gap when it comes to technology. And so I said, okay, so finally, after 15, 20 years in the region, I got a rationale behind what I am observing day to day. And that goes back also on how many women actually study ICT compared to in Europe or North America, where it's right now around 19, 20%. And when we look at the Middle East and Africa, there is a much higher ratio depending on what country you're looking at. So that was super interesting for me. And then I said, okay, if I want to build a women in tech network, as first, we need to look and understand the environment we live in as women in general and in IT in particular. So one work stream of this Academy of Technology study was the world we live in. And I just want to share a few highlights we found out during this study. And I picked the major region I am covering as part of my job role. So one is the GCC. So I'm based in Dubai, and I work very closely with several universities here. And one of my dear friends in New York University, Abu Dhabi, she also ran an academic study to understand on, what is the motivation of women to take a role in IT. And so that really inspired me and said, let me take a look at it from a more broader perspective and to understand where we operate in. And when we look at the Gulf, we have high rates of STEM participation of women. If you look at the UAE, up to 77%, and an average of 56, which is way higher than we see in Europe. We also see, for example, that each country, like if you look at the UAE or Saudi Arabia, have like a national agenda in driving, female participation, female programs, gender programs, to make sure that they participate, whether it comes to building startups, running businesses, participating in IT, with specific programs behind, up to, having 27% of the UAE cabinet of women, okay? Personally, I just experienced, I went into a bank in the UAE, and in their main lobby, they had the quotes of the UAE leaders about gender equality and the importance of, fostering women in the workplace, in the society, where I thought, wow, this is really different to what I see in Europe, for example. This would never happen if I go in a bank in Austria, that we would see the country leaders, being quoted on the importance of women in the workforce. So this is one thing, but it's very different if we move over to Jordan, for example. Jordan has a very low participation of women's participation in the workforce in general. And despite having 48% of the STEM graduates being women, very few of them join the workforce, because what happens, it's a very male-dominated environment, and they always lag 3 years behind, also when it comes in terms of salary and in terms of progressing the career. So there is not a lot of motivation to actually pick that kind of a career, because it's like high pressure, it takes a lot of time, and you don't get rewarded for it. Then if we move over, for example, to Gaza, there is another interesting observation. There are a lot of young women who are entering as entrepreneurs, who have great ideas, but what they need is really mentorship in terms of like senior business leaders to help them succeed and bring up their businesses. And entrepreneurship in the whole region is extremely high compared to what we observe in Europe. For example, 4 in 10 startups in Saudi Arabia are owned by women. So this is kind of very interesting. And then when we move on to Pakistan, this is a country in general with one of the lowest participation of women in the workforce across the Southeast Asian countries, but it has a very developing IT sector. We see, women in the mid and executive level, but what happens really is I see more and more coming up targeted programs by large multinational companies to enforce and support women to join the workforce. This is not just IBM is having programs. For example, I was invited to Telenor to speak on a panel about how we can help women grow in technology, joining the workforce. What are the kind of programs companies need to put in place? So there's lots of activity around that area. Turkey is very much aligned with Europe when it comes to seeing women in STEM, but also what we are observing there is that despite having a lot of like 52,000 students graduating in IT, we see a decrease of female hires from 20 to 10% in the past 10 years. So there is a lot less women joining the workforce in IT. And that's very interesting to me, because for me, Turkey was always the country where we had actually a lot of women also in IBM, so interesting dynamics around that. Egypt, from a historical perspective, had a lot of female leaders. If you look at Cleopatra or Hatshepsut, they had a lot of like female pharaohs. And they also have an agenda, which is called the Vision 2030, which says, okay, we want to increase the women participation in the workforce to 35% and decrease illiteracy to 0%. So again, there are a lot of activities going on in encouraging women to join the workforce. And one thing we observed, so there are also good things to the pandemic, I would say is, by having more acceptance on a work from home policy, allows a lot more women to join the workforce, because they don't have the long commutes, they are not away from home, they can kind of balance between their responsibilities at home and still taking on a career. And I really hope that we are not gonna, go back to pre-pandemic when it comes to, work from home policies, because I think it's a key factor to help women pursue a career in general, and in technical, obviously, for me is more the, the one I'm very passionate about. And then also sub-Saharan Africa, there is the biggest gender gap when it comes to education in general. The population is forecasted to double by 2036. There are, programs where we see like around 17 to 24% in Central Africa when you look at Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania. But there are policies in place also to help increase these numbers. But it also shows, we are far away. If somebody says you have to have 50% of your technical population needs to be females, we also need to be cognizant about the fact that there are actually not that many women who come out of a STEM field. And how do we attract these women and help them grow? But also once they start building their lives and you build a family and children and you take care of your parents, what are the programs we put in place to help them balance between work and life? and come for, be able to accomplish both. So that's the environment we live in. As I said, there are big differences between 77% STEM graduates in the Gulf to 17 or 15% somewhere in Africa. And, it's something where we can look at, what works well in one part of the world to help others. So now let me move on to what does IBM does for women's technical career advancement. So first of all, and this is really something I only became, aware recently in terms of what impact it had on my own career, is the long-standing history of diversity and inclusion in IBM. And I think it really shows, like in 1935, Thomas Watson said, equal pay for equal work, and that was a very early stage in time, or having a first female vice president in 43. And then, all the way through, putting in different policy letters on, diversity, hiring people independent of race, color, religion. And so building this long-standing tradition in IBM really makes an impact, I believe, on people. If I would not have started my career in IBM, I think it might have looked very different, because I never had the feeling that I am different because I'm a woman. I have less opportunity because I'm a woman. And looking back now really shows that it's long-standing and it's a culture we live. And when you join IBM, this is like how you grow up, and I literally grew up professionally in IBM. So that's quite interesting. You can all find this if you're interested in more detail on the internet. But I thought I'd just highlight that because I think it's important. And then we had a study which was done by the Institute of Business Value by IBM to look at, okay, what does it take to create more women leaders? So it's not just enough to hire a lot of women in IBM, but also how do we help them accelerate the career? And it's not just the women helping women, it's a whole ecosystem you need to put in place, including policies, but also getting the buy-in from all leaders and everybody in IBM, okay? So the key finding were, okay, there is a big leadership gap, okay? There is only 18% of, generally when interviewing a lot of CIOs or CEOs across the world, 18% are only senior leaders. And then there is another interesting part, which they call the priority paradox, is that, it's not a priority. If you don't make it a priority and a goal for each and everyone to help promote women, and we all work on it, it will not happen. I always say, if I have a vision, but I don't, measure the KPIs, it's not going to happen. Also, the realization on what impact it has to have a diverse workforce, in terms of innovation, inclusion, the different dynamics, not everybody has realized that. And so that's not a priority. And then we have the first movers, is really the ones who make it a priority. And I can give you an example. In IBM, all executives, every manager has a goal to achieve, to say, okay, we are really putting focus on bringing in women into the organization and also helping the ones we have in place to grow their career. Let's not go down the easy path in terms of, I have an open position, I need to fill it in 5 days, and then I just go and hire the best person. There are just so many more men in there. To find the right women on the market with such smaller talent pool takes more effort, and that takes time. And so this is really important to acknowledge. And so they said, so when we look at the first movers, the ones are fully committed, is, okay, we have career development planning specifically for women need. So for example, I have a diversity and inclusion HR leader who works with us on making sure we have the right programs in place. We have the same metrics, which I think is very important. I don't want to be promoted because I'm a woman. I want to be promoted because I can do the job, okay? But we need to provide the equal career opportunities. So we need to really look at who are the women who can do the job versus just going the easy way. And then we need to create, a culture around this whole thing. And so this is really like the steps. So it's a formal business priority. As I said, we are measured on making sure we are increasing the female talent and the female workforce. We need to make sure that our leadership team is on board. We have measurable goals and milestones. We have initiatives, and this ranges from anything in terms of recruitment, hiring, making sure people are attracted to the workplace. We have the right programs in place. And then obviously the inclusion of everybody, all right? If you don't do this, you know, you're likely to fail, because if there is no focus, no business priority is not going to happen. So then my last part, and I know I'm getting short on time, is, you know, how do you become a technical executive? And we in particular looked at female technical leaders. In IBM, we have in the technical organization executive positions, which are IBM distinguished engineers, IBM designers, distinguished designers, and IBM fellows. They are equal to directors and vice presidents. And it's a very tough job to get appointed to that. And I got 50 women to answer 10 questions. And I always paired two women in IBM to interview one of these, or 1 to 3 of those female technical leaders to understand what made them successful. And so obviously we had a lot of data interviewing 50 women. And I said, okay, so how do we actually find out what are the key findings? And so I reached out to the IBM Haifa lab, and they have a technology which is called Project Debater, where you can feed all this in, and AI tools are using to generate the the key findings. So let me share with you. So we had 10 questions, which were really crowdsourced from the team I was working with, what they wanted to know from them, which was about, you know, what are your biggest challenges? How did you overcome them? How do you promote your work, that people know what you're doing? How do you find new opportunities to grow? How did you find your mentors, your sponsors, and so on, you know? So there were 10 interesting questions, and we had 4 key findings. And it was interesting. They were really the major things. And this is what I really want to give to all of you to think of. So one is becoming a lifelong learner, you know, be curious, challenge it, have your point of view, be a self-starter, share your experience, knowledge with others. That's key. That's one key. The second part was really, you need to look into mentors and sponsors. Okay, so the mentors are the ones who give you guidance. They help you achieve your expertise, whether it's technical or whatever you like to achieve. They will advocate for you, and they will help you to achieve the skills you need to get to the next role. The sponsor is somebody who is already on higher levels, who has a big network, but also has a good oversight on what are the different career opportunities which are coming up. They will vouch for you. They will help you to get to this next career step, and they will be with you on your career journey. And so these 2 roles are crucial, and many men and women equally actually don't really focus on that spot, on this part. You know, they think just things happen by chance. You know, this is not true, you know, so you need to build your network to rely on. And then we are living in a digital world. So you need to be socially and technically eminent. So first of all, technical eminent means you need to be known as an expert in an industry, in a technology, and you are very vocal about your point of view. Today, this would be like blogs, podcasts, publications you're doing. Back in the days when I was young, I would write books which are published, but obviously that's a much longer running effort. So I think we are much better to share knowledge these days, but we also need to communicate it. And this is where you really need to build your brand on the social media channels of your choice, you know, whether this is LinkedIn, whether this is Twitter, whether this is any of the tech blogs, where you need to go out there and be seen. So somebody who goes and Googles you with your name finds out who you are and what is about you. And then last but not least, work-life balance. You know, you really need to plan around this. And I think what's critical here is you really need to set boundaries. in terms of when do I work and when do I work on achieving my next goal and when I'm taking my time off, okay? And you need to prioritize the jobs you take on, the assignments you take on. Don't waste your time on something you can do easily because you just have done it 100 times. Look for the challenging pieces, you know, who make you grow and get you to the next place. And you need to get your support from your family and from your coworkers because they need to understand that you're putting a lot of focus into growing your career. And you need to explain to them, listen, I need to spend my next 3 weeks on a project. I can't spend time with you, but I will go on a holiday with you after, or I'm spending a half day on Sunday with you where I promise I don't pick up the phone, I don't do anything else, but then you need to give me the other half day off, okay? So this is really critical to be successful. Nobody can work 7 times 24 hours. Everybody will be burned out at some point, very tired and not successful. So this is, you need to get your tactics together on how you balance between your work and life. So this is everything I had to share, Sabine. I hope that was something interesting, inspiring, something new to learn from what we learned. And back to you.
I think it's very inspiring, and having this data, it sets us, you know, it helps us set, you know, set ourselves to something more impactful, because when you have data, you can do so much more. So thank you so much, Sabine, for this presentation. You know, when we started discussing about it, I was so excited that you'll be presenting this to the world, because I think this is something we all need to know to move, you know, upwards and onwards. So thank you so much.
Well, thanks. And, you know, anybody who is watching can connect with me on LinkedIn or follow me on LinkedIn. I'm trying to, you know, update and whatever I do there. So that's really my main social media channel. Sometimes Twitter, but mostly LinkedIn.
Thank you so much. Stay tuned for the next session. It is an IBM panel of amazing trailblazers, and it will start in less than 10 minutes. So thank you so much.
Thank you.